Good morning. Welcome to the first of the series on combating rural roadway departures. It's Victoria Beal with the LTAP Center, and I have with me Ray Brushart, and we are going to co-instruct this first session for you. Ray has unfortunately caught some bronchitis and can't talk as much as he normally does. So I'm going to be helping out at the beginning portion, but he is still going to kick in here at the end and, like the trooper he is, provide some information towards the end of our webinar. So would like to remind you that we are accepting questions in the question box. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in there. Also, we have in the handout section for you a copy of the slides from today's session. And I've also loaded in two RON updates. Those are our route of navigation job aids. And in those, we have a discussion over clear zones, which is something that we'll be talking about in our webinar on combating rural roadway departures. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start moving us through the content. Ray, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not really. I'm just happy to be here, and this is one of my favorite courses. So very
Great.
excited for it
All
to
right.
kick off.
So I've already covered the fact that Ray and I are going to be co-instructing for you. We are going to do some Menti polling. I sent an email out about this, a little under an hour ago. And if you are interested in being a part of the Menti polling, we are happy to have you be a part of that. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my other screen so you can see the question that we currently have up. And right now, what I want to do is just kind of get you warmed up with Menti. If you're going to participate in the Mentimeter polling, you want to go to menti.com, and that is at the top of the screen. And then it asks you for a code, and you want to put in 94656865. That's our code for Menti. So, and we'd like to know for our warm-up question, which show did you actually like binge watching during the pandemic? And I did put a couple of answers in there for folks. If you aren't a binge watcher, if you don't watch a whole lot of TV like me, um, you know, you can always choose the books, or you can be just like Phil Dunphy and say, I forgot. So, Ray, how about you? What did you like binge watching?
Well, mine is not on that list.
I'm
There was a
sorry.
couple of good HBO series got caught up on, and all of Grey's Anatomy. I don't know how many years back I went. There
Yeah,
was another one on Hulu called or ABC called The Rookie. I really liked that one. So.
there you go. Well, I personally had never seen Game of Thrones, and I did binge watch that one all the way through, but that was so intense by the end of it, I just couldn't bring myself to binge watch anything else at that point in time. I went back to my books. So, but it looks like folks are figuring Menti out. And right now we have a tie between I don't watch TV, I read. Oh, nope. Game of Thrones just took first place again. So, and I'm surprised nobody binge watched Downton Abbey. You guys must have all wanted to watch that even before the pandemic started. So, all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to our presentation, but we do have some more Mentimeter questions coming up. So make sure you keep your other screen or your phone active, and we'll be working through those as we get to those slides. So our learning objectives for today. We want to describe the rural roadway crash departure problem, which, when it comes right down to it, people think of the word rural and you think of not a whole lot of people. But I have to tell you that the crash departure problem, especially the rural roadway departures, the run off the roads, are way overrepresented on the crash statistics based on the number of people that actually live out in the rural areas. So it's really an important topic, especially for Ohio, and I'll show you why. We are going to talk about the three objectives. This is like your formula on how you can combat the problem. And to go along with that, throughout this webinar series, we're going to discuss different proven safety countermeasures that you can look at and assess and decide whether or not they are good for your roadways and whether they're going to help with your rural roadway crash problem. And then we're also going to talk about, the how you can recognize the crash reduction potential for those different countermeasures. And a lot of that, works through that highway safety manual methodology, but we're not going to make you do the formulas, so don't worry about that. There's actually, a website out there. It's the Crash Modification Factors Clearinghouse website where they've already done a lot of that calculation for you. So we're going to make sure we talk about that and make sure you're aware of where it's at and how you can use it. So very sobering slide here. Um, Federal Highway, they have a definition for a run off the road, and it's a crash where a vehicle either crosses the edge line or a center line or otherwise leaves the traveled way. So they don't actually have to physically like drop off one side of the road or the other. They could just cross that center line and it's considered a roadway departure because they've actually left their lane. Unfortunately, last year we saw an increase in traffic fatalities, and you would think that that's counterintuitive to what would have happened during the pandemic, since pretty much all of us on this call know that the um, average daily traffic went way down for big chunks of time during 2020. But unfortunately, with less traffic on the road, something clicked and people started driving in a much more dangerous fashion when it comes right down to it. Because we actually saw an increase in the traffic fatalities. And that number you see there, that 36,680, that's that's a preliminary figure for 2020 as of the beginning of this month on June 3rd. So, of those crashes, and this number, you take a look at the split on this. You have 49% of the fatalities, which are happening in the urban area, and 51%, which are happening in the rural area. And, if you break that down just a little bit further, of that 51%, you're looking at 34% that are actual rural roadway departures. So, if you're following the percents, you know, bigger percent is 51 here on this first slide that we saw. And then out of the next slide, the bigger percent is 34. So what we're trying to get to is we're trying to get to what I would look at as low-hanging fruit. What's the biggest problem that we can tackle first? Um, so when you look at that, you'll see that, these rural roadway departures really are overrepresented in the crash totals. So when you look at this next slide, I'm going to move to where you see all the states. They have on there the percent of rural roadway departure fatalities, and this is for 2014 to 2016. But the numbers are still good. I mean, it does take a little bit of time for the national crash reporting to be able to be pulled together. And Ohio has 31% of their crashes as rural roadway departure fatalities. 26% of Ohio's population actually lives in rural areas. So, we are just slightly below that national average of 34%, but 31% is still a high number, especially when you think about the fact that, the biggest portion of the population is living in the urban areas. So if you break that down and you do the calculations, you know, there's, from 2014 to 2016, the US averaged 11,874 rural roadway departures a year. And you divide that number out by 365 days, and you come down to this 30 people a day number. And when you say 30 people, you really have to put faces and lives with that number. You know, it's not just a number. It's 30 people who didn't come home and pick up their mail at the mailbox and come in and start making dinner or come home and start working on their homework. Those were 30 empty seats at the dinner table for those families. And that's just from one day. I mean, tonight, 30 people. won't be there. And it's our responsibility as roadway professionals and safety professionals to save the people that are behind this 30 number. And that's why you're here. And I'm very proud of all of you for joining this webinar series. This is a course that hopefully you'll be able to take information and immediately apply it to what you're doing on a daily basis to help drive that number down. Because I got to tell you, to me and to anybody who really understands what we're talking about with this number, the only acceptable number is 0. So Federal Highway has come up with a great approach to the effort for reducing the rural roadway departures. And, they've looked at the fact that we have this mission, and it has to be on all public roads, not just, the state system. And, they have 4 pillars that this initiative rests on. So, they want us to look at all the public roads, and they want us to take this list of proven safety countermeasures, which a lot of research has gone into finding and determining which are the best countermeasures. And then they want us to use what they call the systemic approach, which we're going to talk quite a bit about. But systemic approach is different from that traditional hotspot approach that so many of us are used to. The hotspot is where you take a look at a crash map and say, okay, we're having a ton of crashes right in this one area. So let's fix whatever's going on at that spot. It's very reactive. But with systemic, we look proactively. We say, okay, if this spot has had a ton of crashes, say it's a curve that is very well traveled in, a jurisdiction, then we say, okay, that curve type has had crash issues. Let's look and see what other curves are same or similar in the jurisdiction. Maybe don't have as much ADT, but we know eventually somebody's going to crash there. That's what the, chances are. And let's proactively fix that curve. This solves that problem that so many people had said for so long with the hotspot approach is, why do I have to wait until a crash happens before I fix a problem that I know is a problem? You know, so Federal Highway with the systemic approach is able to, now provide funding, for improvements on the system before a crash has actually happened, which is what needs to occur for us to get to 0. So they also, talk about safety action plans. And I know that that's something here in Ohio that we have focused on as well, and we'll be talking about with you. So they also wanted to make sure we understood why it had to be all public roads. And, when we get to the Ohio numbers, this will become even, more stunning. But, typically, as when you look out across the country, you know, roads maintained by the states, equal 55% of the rural roadway departure crashes. And then roads maintained by local jurisdictions equal 45% of the crashes. But when you get into, Ohio's figures, you'll see that, our roadways, the majority of the roadway system is actually taken care of by local agencies. Only 16% is maintained by the state DOT, by ODOT. When you look at our center line miles, 84% is actually maintained by our local agencies. And then, if you look at the crashes that are happening on the local roadways, you know, 62% of all the serious injuries in the state are happening on local roads in Ohio, and 53% of the fatalities are happening on local roads. So, we do have an issue with roadway departure and serious injury fatalities on the local road system. And, you look at the different breakdown of that for the percentage there. And all this information can be found in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and there was a new one published last year. And I would definitely encourage you, if you haven't looked at that yet, please pull it up and take a look at it. All right, so we've got another Mentimeter question here, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. I would like to know how you think that the following items, which I'm going to show here on the screen. Sorry, it's a lot to kind of navigate between things, but I want to make this as interactive as possible. I want you on your Mentimeter to rank in order of what you think the different crash types. These are the top 5 crash types from Ohio's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And if you downloaded the handout in the handout section for today's slides, don't look ahead. But I want you to tell me, which ones do you think, rank first, second, third, fourth, fifth? And I did pull just the top 5. So no fear looking ahead. And we've got 8 people who voted here. Ray, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to
If
go
you
with
if
roadway
you
departure.
Well, yeah, for first, but what are you
Oh,
thinking about for,
for second,
yeah?
I'm thinking speed.
That's what a lot of people are thinking too here. So,
Well, I've seen some statistics of this past year.
yeah.
That speed was involved in a whole lot of crashes in the
Well,
past year.
and this is not just last year. This is actually straight out of our Strategic Highway Safety Plan, the document that I showed an image of earlier. But this is from 2015 to 2019. So, all right. Well, we've had like 25 folks respond. I'm going to give it a second or two more for anybody else who wants to vote. And then we'll switch to the next slide and see how you guys did in ranking things. All right. I'm going to take us back to the other slide and go ahead and show you what the answers were. So you were right, as everybody was, that roadway departure is the top, you know, cause of crashes. And then after that came intersections, which the 25 people who voted also chose correctly. And then you guys said speed, which actually was 5th. They attributed the young drivers as 3rd and seat belts as 4th, as far as the highest number of fatalities and serious injuries. But there are more that are ranked farther down on this screen. I just pulled out the top section because I wanted to make it as readable as possible for you. So I have a video for you next. So let's take a look at the video. Let me get this pulled up here. And if you have called into the webinar as opposed to using your your audio through your computer, you're not going to be able to hear the audio on this video. So just sit tight for a couple minutes. But I will send out links to the video afterwards so you can watch it. All right, we're going to pull it up here. Here we go. And you don't need to contact FHWA because you're already in this webinar. So we are here to help you with this. Let me go ahead and get our screen back up. But that video was prepared as a part of this course. In the Federal Highway Administration, I think did a really great job on explaining, what it is that we're going to be helping you to understand throughout the webinar series. So, there are different ways of addressing all public roads, and these are examples that have been, put together, and we'll talk about specifically in Ohio how we address all public roads in a minute. But, you know, in general, if you look at different funding opportunities that are out there, and there are funding opportunities available. Ohio is very, very fortunate. We have, if not the highest, one of the highest amounts of funding that's committed to safety projects of any state in the nation. We are committed, through our funding, that you talk about putting your money where, your priorities are. And in Ohio, a priority for us is safety on our roadways. We're also on the data part incredibly fortunate. Other states come to us to say, how did you get the data? But Ohio has crash data, and we don't have to wait years to see what the crash data is. Our system, the GCAT system, if you're not aware of it, we can definitely get you more information about it. But GCAT is a feature within the TIM system where if you have access that's been granted, you can actually go in and create your own crash maps and see where crashes are happening in pretty short order after they've occurred. For some jurisdictions, where their law enforcement is actually directly connected in and sending their crash reports electronically in as opposed to paper versions. Crashes can show up within days on the GCAT system as opposed to having to wait for somebody to hand enter a crash report. But GCAT pulls all that information from the OH1, which is Ohio's crash report that's filled out anytime a crash happens, and puts all that information in the system together so you can actually map out where crashes have occurred on your roadway system and know where these issues are happening. And then if you see that where the curve type or the intersection type is having a lot of crash activity, then you can also look for same or similar with the systemic approach. We also help you out with project development. Materials procurement. This one is one that got added onto this list because of Ohio's Township Sign Grant Program. You know, we look every year at which townships that haven't been funded previously um, are sitting then towards, at the top of the list with an overrepresented number of crashes on their township system. And we invite them to apply for signs, posts, and hardware that they can install in their system to help improve the safety for the traveling public. And then contracting assistance, that's available too. So in Ohio, we have $12 million out of the $150 million that is directly allocated to the County Engineers Association. They actually administer this funding for safety projects. And then we also have funding for safety action plans, in addition to the Township Sign Grant program that I just mentioned. And also the GIS crash analysis tool, the GCAT system. We have that, and if you want training on that, we are going to be doing another webinar in July, and I'll send out the information if you want to sign up for that and learn how to use GCAT yourself. I think it's a great tool. If I can use it, pretty much anybody can use it, trust me. And then we also have what's called a simplified project application form. And that is where, if you have a crash that's happening where you want to really, just focus on one type of fix for that crash type, where you're not really involving a lot of different technical disciplines, but say it's just a traffic fix, with signage, you can go the simplified project application form route, and it gets you to hopefully that yes a whole lot quicker. So, out of the local safety assistance, since we kicked this off in 2018, and I just got this update from my colleagues over there yesterday. So you'll see this is current information as of yesterday. We've been able to get 11 different regional and county safety plans put in place. We have 4 projects that had been approved through the Systemic Safety Improvements project, and then we have 56 different roadway safety audits and safety studies that have been funded. So if you have questions about any of that or would like assistance in getting to that help for your jurisdiction and your agency, reach out to Ray or myself, and we will get you in touch with the right people and get you the information you need to be able to participate in that and apply for the funding. So it's time now for another Menti question. I want to keep this interactive. So I'm going to pull that question up over on Mentimeter. You guys can start responding. And I'm going to go ahead and pull the screen up. So this one, you got to type some stuff in here. This isn't just, choose an answer. I want you to share the types of improvements your agency has already used to reduce roadway departures. So I know it takes a second to type things in, but as you type in, these items will show up on the screen. So hopefully some of you have done some items to help reduce roadway departure. There we go. Ah, I love it. It's a word cloud. Brush cutting. Oh boy, that's a big one. I got to tell you, I'm almost to the point where I want to just drive around and start taking pictures of all these hidden signs that are out there right now because the brush is just growing like crazy. Um, rumble strips, yes. And I know that some folks aren't as enthusiastic about those as other folks, but I tell you, I live close to a state route where they put rumble strips in, and I don't hear it. I mean, the people a lot of times will argue, well, it's going to make so much noise, and I won't be able to sleep. I tell you what, not even during the day do I hear it, let alone at night. So the only thing that wakes me up at night is about 3:30 this morning. We had our windows open and it was so nice outside, but I am fairly certain there was a skunk somewhere outside my bedroom window because it just got really odorific about 3:30 in the morning. And I certainly was not going to go out there looking for it. So, roundabouts, I love roundabouts. Fantastic safety improvement. If you have the space for that, it cuts your factor there at the intersection from 32 different potential conflict points in a traditional intersection down to only 8 possible conflict points in a roundabout. And it also drives the speed at which people are approaching that intersection way down. So if they do have a bumper to bumper incident in a roundabout, it's at a much slower speed. Recessed, wet, reflective, and I would take it that that's the striping. Guardrail, absolutely. That's some more of the traditional type of keeping you on the roadway. Shoulder whitening. You guys are doing good. You've got lots of things out there that you're doing already. That's fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and move us back over to the presentation. All right. So why do drivers leave the road? Well, you look at your road condition. There could be something that's causing the driver to, unintentionally leave the road. I think here in Ohio about snow and ice time, that it happens. Vehicle component failure, something could happen with the car, collision avoidance. I live in one of the 3 counties that have the top number of deer takes in the state every year. And, just driving home the other evening from a friend's house, I saw 6 different deer feeding along the roadway and one of the roads I took back to my house. So, you know, not only deer, but, other things. I don't know how many times where I used to live, not too far from my current house, that I had to call the neighbor and say, hey, your cows are on the road again. Um, Driver error, though. Driver error is the one thing that's on this list that we have bolded, and it's because it's the one that really truly causes most people to leave the road. And Ray, I think you had a story you wanted to share here, didn't you? Got to unmute if you're talking to us, Ray. Well, maybe. Oh,
How
there
about
you go.
now?
Yay, we
All
can hear you
right.
now.
I have too many mute buttons to deal with. Yeah, I was young and dumb once and had a roadway departure crash. I think some speed was involved in a curve, but as you can see, I'm okay, thank gosh. But I know a lot of people that probably people in class today can think of a time where they were in a roadway departure crash.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that they happen. Sometimes people are driving too fast for the conditions. Unfortunately, people still drink and drive, or do drugs and drive, or maybe even take a prescription medication they didn't realize was going to impact them. They didn't read the label and, end up going out and falling asleep at the wheel. So, it's our job though to try the best we can to design and build the roads. So if they have, you know, a problem that they've caused, that, their error isn't going to make them pay the ultimate price. So, and obviously your error didn't make you pay the ultimate price, Ray, or you wouldn't be here with us. Thank goodness you're still here.
Yes, thank goodness.
So,
I wasn't
well,
even injured at all, by the way.
well, that's good. I heard your dad wasn't too happy about losing his car, though, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but he is happy to have you still. So, all right. Well, on the next slide, I accidentally muted myself. Sorry. The talks about the driver being the weakest link in the system and the need to design around, the human. So if you look at this Venn diagram and the overlapping parts, say you look at the vehicle being 13%, you have to take the whole of all the percents inside that vehicle circle to come up with the 13. Same with the roadway. And then the driver was actually 93% of the reason why the crashes are happening. So I have my own rural roadway departure story. I was coming home back in 1994, and after I'd gotten off work one day and had gone to the doctor's, was on my way home, and rural road, nobody really normally on this road, and I was very young and stupid and was driving along, and came up on a car that had signaled that they were going to turn right. So I thought, get home as quick as I can, went to pass on the left, and when you know, instead of turning right, they turned left. And I T-boned them, and we all ended up down in the ditch together, and it was a pretty steep ditch. I believe my car was nose down, and by the grace of God, none of us died. But, I'll tell you what, I don't pass people on rural roads anymore. And I certainly look to make sure people actually turn the way that they signal that they're going to turn. So, rural roadways can be very dangerous, especially when the driver makes the wrong choice. So, in the video that we saw, that they showed how crashes are not consistent from year to year. And, it's because when we first started with the hotspot approach years ago, that approach definitely, had its time. And, they've worked through correcting a lot of those hotspots. But we're not seeing a decrease like we wanted to see. We're not getting to zero. So, when you look at the map here that I've put up on the screen, we're showing you all of those years together from 14 through 18, but they're different colors. So very rarely, though, do you see those markers where the crashes happened in this section of roadway um, in the same place. They're all pretty much at different areas. And that's because, I mean, I think maybe one of them up here, one of them up here. Here we go. We had to actually look pretty hard to find ones that had happened in the same place. But most of the others, you see are just happening in different areas. But I bet you if you look at this roadway part here, or you look at another roadway part here, they're both curves. The they probably, when it comes right down to it, excuse me, could be same or similar in the roadway. And that's what the systemic approach wants to get us to, is to look at, those same or similar areas, and then what are the low cost improvements that we can start with to try to fix the issue that's happening out there. But the bottom line, when you look at it, is that fatal crash locations are random. But as we talked about, the fatal crash types are predictable. So, we have systemic safety improvements defined, and it's where they look at making an improvement on a very, very wide basis on a high risk roadway feature. And it's, a particular crash type rather than the crash frequency. So, when we discuss, say, our township sign grant program in Ohio, one of the things we're looking at is if they have, a certain type of curve, we want to make sure that they are hitting that curve type with the treatments on the whole system, not just where they've already had crashes. So, systemic safety improvements, you know, are really applicable where in the low rural roadway system, our local roadways, and specific crash types. One thing in Ohio, and I'm pretty sure most of us have seen it when we've been out driving on the interstate system, the state DOT had already been focusing on systemic improvements. So one of the first ones they did was the cable median barrier. Now, this isn't something that you necessarily use on a rural road, but it's an example of a systemic safety improvement that I could say probably most of you on this webinar have seen. And they did that based on specific criteria. The median had to be under a certain width, and they put it out there on the system, and it has definitely saved lives. So you could do the same thing. You could look at your system and say, okay, any curve that has this type of radius or this type of super elevation, then we're going to just systemically make this improvement to it. So, it does supplement that traditional site analysis, um, but it allows you to include the areas that haven't actually had a crash yet. So the roadway features that are considered high risk, there's a lot of different things you can look at, and we'll be discussing these throughout the webinar. But one of the first ones I know that we're going to focus on are the curves. So when you look over under the roadway features, you have your horizontal curve radius and the density. Presence of a visual trap. Boy, I could show you some good videos of visual traps, especially when you have, where you have a road that's been maybe constructed or reconstructed and the old road is still there, and it's not well signed. So you come up to it and, it looks like maybe you should continue straight, but all of a sudden the road's curving off to the left or to the right. And if that person hasn't driven the road before, they really don't know which way to go. So, the presence of an intersection, especially if the driver isn't anticipating it and you have traffic that's coming into the intersection trying to cross when the, person who's coming through that intersection did not have to stop, on one of the approaches, then, that could cause a pretty severe, if not fatal, T-bone crash. So, and then, your exposure, what's the ADT out there, the speed limits, um, or what's really the safe speed for them to go through a curve. We're going to talk about that some still this morning. And then roadside features, looking at, how steep is the drop off. If they do end up leaving the roadway, are they immediately just going to basically be unrecoverable? So, what can you do to try to make those drop offs less of a hazard and easier for them to get back onto the roadway. And that's a lot of where we talk about not only, guardrails been a great traditional safety feature in a lot of the more severe drop offs. But just something as simple as the pavement drop off and causing problems with the tire rubbing and the safety edge that's available. We'll be discussing that too. So I've got another video for you. I'm trying to keep things interactive today. Actually, I've got a couple here I'm going to show you. So first one we're going to start off with, and I know that it's talking about an interstate ramp, but I want you to listen to what they have to say about the curve and the advisory speeds on here. And then I'll show you a different video here. This first one's called Advisory Speeds Are There for a Reason. And this, by the way, is not ODOT when they talk about it, meaning Ohio. It's another one of those O states. We've got that video, and then I have another one I'm going to show you too. But while I'm showing you the next video, or if you have thoughts, what other type of systemic improvement could the they look at in that ramp to kind of step things up? There's one that comes to my mind, but I want to see if you guys are thinking it too. So drop it in the question box for me. Tell me what could be the next type of systemic improvement they could look at to try to fix that issue with the drivers not, you know, truly understanding and driving that advisory speed. So here's the next video. I like that video. The county engineer there is the one who did that video. So we've had some people respond in the question box, and I appreciate the comments that they've made. Some said, you should look at rumble strips, also a speed feedback sign. If you are here in Ohio in a local jurisdiction, we could actually loan you a speed feedback sign if you're having that problem. Um, you know, let's see. Also, oh, this is a good response. Here we go. There was localized roughness going onto the bridge, which led to non-uniform tire pavement contact. That adds to the danger and risk when it's wet. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I mean, one thing I thought about too was either the diamond type grinding or the high friction surface treatment would be another thing to look at. But, really it's up to their safety team to take a look and say, okay, we started with a low cost safety improvement, and now we should take a look at, what's the next step up if we're not getting the results that we want from that low cost safety improvement. So, the most harmful events, they talk about the big three, and those, are your head-on collisions, which are considered roadway departures because you've left the traveled lane. And then you have your rollovers that happen when people depart the roadway, and then trees that are in the roadway. That's that clear zone that I mentioned that we have handouts for you in the handout section of the GoToWebinar box. So, you know, over 75% based on the FARS data from 2014 to 16, over 75% of the rural roadway departures are due to just those three crash types. So it's really critical that we look at that information and make sure that we're dealing with, like I mentioned, the low hanging fruit. Go for those big percentages where you can get hopefully the biggest impact on driving crashes down. For curve related rural roadway departure fatalities and those three types, there are some guides out there that can help you. And, we have provided you the PDF of today's slides, so you should be able to get to these links. And these documents are available at no charge on the internet. You can just, click the link and get to the guide. And both the low cost treatments for horizontal curve safety, and then NCHRP Report 500. This is actually a series of different reports. This volume 7 is the one that is a guide for reducing collisions on horizontal curves. So, that guide from 2016, the one above, and actually the 2016 version is an update to the 2006 version that was originally done. But if you look at focusing on how to prevent these crash types, then you'll have hopefully driven down the numbers in on your system. So roadway departure objectives. This was one of our learning objectives up front, if you remember. There's a three-part way to look at this. The first thing we want to try to do with these vehicles that are driving our rural roads is we want to try to keep them on the road. So that's where you're looking at different types of improvements, such as your curve signing, your pavement markings, friction treatments, rumble strips. One thing that just baffles us sometimes when we look at those crash reports is it isn't always the curves on the rural roadways where people are running off. And we really feel strongly that people sometimes pay less attention when they're on a rural straightaway than they do in the curve because they feel safer on the straightaway. The road's going straight. They think they can look away and change the radio or start checking that smartphone, which they should have turned off and locked in their trunk when they started driving, because distracted driving is impaired driving. I mean, it's just the same as or even worse than being drunk and going out and driving. So, these types of treatments, especially your rumbles along the side of the roadway, can help with those straightaway to get people re-alert and make sure that they get themselves back into the roadway where they should be. And then if they do end up departing the roadway, we want to reduce the potential for that crash by making sure, if at all possible, that there's shoulders. We're going to talk about the safety edge. Our LTAP center has a safety edge paving shoe that if you've never tried that on your roadways and your contractor doesn't have it available, we'll loan it to you if you want to have them try putting a safety edge on. It costs less than 1% of your entire paving project to have a safety edge put on your roads. And you'll see that that clearly helps people get back onto the roadway. You can also do a center line buffer. you know, Make sure you're checking out your clear zones and that you have traversable slopes. And if they aren't able to stay on the road and you're looking at reducing the potential for crashes, can't get them back onto the road quickly and easily, and they end up having an actual crash, you want to be able to minimize the severity. And that's where we're going to talk about breakaway devices and different barriers. So this is important. Remember these three principles. Keep them on the road, reduce the potential for the crash if they start to depart, and then minimize the severity if they can't get themselves back on the roadway. So I mentioned early on about crash modification factors, and also as a part of that are what they call crash reduction factors. And what I want to cover with you here is, in the highway safety manual, they have the methodology for how to calculate these, but there is also the crash modification factors clearinghouse, which is out there that can be a big help to you. And what the crash modification factor does is it actually estimates the change in how often a crash is going to occur on a specific, element of the roadway by implementing a certain crash, or excuse me, countermeasure. So they look at the base condition, which is 1.0. So if you have a crash modification factor that is less than 1, it means that you're going to have fewer crashes. Now, if you come up with a crash modification factor, a change that you're looking at making on the road, and it actually ends up being greater than 1, you don't want that because that means more crashes. So the crash reduction factor is the actual percent reduction that the crashes can be expected. So here you can have a positive or a negative, and the negative would mean an increase. Hopefully I didn't confuse you there. Just remember, you want it once you put the change in, you want your crash modification factor to be less than 1, and there is the crash modification um, factors warehouse out there, not warehouse, but clearinghouse. And I will definitely send you a link to that. So, all right, well, we've come to what, if we were sitting in the classroom, we would deem the end of Module 1. So I'm going to go over some quick quiz questions with you, and I've got those over in Menti because we want to keep things interactive. So hopefully if you've been paying attention, these will be really easy. Which of these crash types are included in the definition of a roadway departure crash? And you can select more than one here. So go ahead, if you wouldn't mind, and then start selecting your responses. And I want to see how many people get this correct. Hopefully all of you will. And then once we get through our review questions, you're going to hear a little bit more from me, and then I'm turning things over to Ray, letting him save his voice. All right, we've got at least 16 of you that have responded. That's good. I can see that in the bottom corner of the screen. It looks like the majority of you are getting this right. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can take about 30 more seconds and get your responses in. And then I'm going to switch us over back to the PowerPoint screen. All right, so which of the crash types are included in the definition of a roadway departure crash? We've got A, which 26 people chose. We do not have B, so 2 of you chose that. Definitely not included in the definition of a roadway departure crash, unfortunately, because you could stay in your lane and still hit that deer. I've done that at least 3 times where I live. However, 26 of you chose rolling over on the roadside. That is in the definition of a roadway departure crash. I'm very glad no one chose right angle impacts in an intersection. The head-on crashes, 24 of you chose. And I'll be honest with you, when I first read the definition, I really didn't think that would be included, and I was surprised to find out it was, which, I mean, it makes sense. You have left your traveled lane. Even if you've, moved into somebody else's traveled lane, you're still not in your own. And then definitely hitting a pedestrian or crosswalk is not part of a rural roadway departure crash in the definition. So there's the definition at the bottom. Hopefully you've got that now, but it seems like the majority of you did, so that's great. All right, I'm going to switch back to Menti. We're going to do the second of our questions. All right, what percentage of roadway fatalities are due to roadway departure crashes on rural roadways? And this, we're looking at this nationally. We're not just focusing on Ohio. There was a percent that was given, so hopefully you guys will be able to remember what that percent was. I love the little dot exercise here where it kind of like spreads out into different dots on the screen. This is probably one of my favorite little Menti screens. Just keeps things interesting. Oh, we're getting up there in numbers. Okay, good. Getting even more responses than the last question. That's awesome. All right, I'm going to switch us back over so we can see the answer. Okay, so the percent, and 20 of you actually chose this, is 34. Good job. All right, and then the last of our Mentimeter questions for the day. Oops, there we go. Is going to be the last of our review questions for this module. And you're going to type this in. But what are the 3 objectives used to combat roadway departure crashes? And we just went over this, so hopefully you guys remember that. Type it in for me. Hopefully somebody will type it in. I know Ray's not connected to Menti, so he can't type it in for us. But all right, here we go. Keep vehicles on the road, reduce potential for crashes, minimize severity of crashes. Good. Keep vehicles on the road. Yeah, that's one of them. Folks must not like to type as much as they do. We're just clicking to respond. Stay on the road, reduce potential, minimize severity. You got it. Yeah, guardrails is definitely a way we can do that. Yep, you guys are getting it. Good. Well, I'm going to give you a second or two more to finish typing in for anyone who started typing that in. I appreciate it. And then I'm going to switch us back to our presentation here and the answer to the question. We've got keep vehicles on the road, reduce the potential for crashes, and minimize the severity. So great job, guys. All right, well, that's going to move us into our second session, second module in the course. And it's keep the vehicles on the road, signings and markings. We're going to start getting into the actual application here of different types of countermeasures. So our learning objectives in this session module really is that we want to identify signing and marking countermeasures that can help you reduce your roadway departures. And we're going to go over requirements from the MUTCD for signing and markings. And then we're going to talk about cost-effective enhancements that can actually exceed, because sometimes you're going to need to exceed. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I don't know if you caught it on that video of the advisory speed for the curve over in the state of Oregon, but not only did they put the advisory speed on the right-hand side of the road, but you saw that they had it there on the left, and that was to capture people's eyes. They were having a problem there, and it was a low-cost way to exceed the requirement. And you have it on the right as a requirement, but they also put it on the left, which definitely was exceeding the MUTCD requirement, but it added an additional factor, a level of safety. So doubling up signs is always a great step. All right, so we have a pre-test here, and what I'd like for you to do is just throw it in the question box for me. What treatments to reduce roadway departures do you see in this picture that are actually present, and what other treatments might be considered? So this is the question box on GoToWebinar. Just go ahead and find it there on your GoToWebinar panel, and you don't have to tell me every treatment. Just throw in the name of, one or two treatments. I know what I'd be thinking. Here we go. They said it does have the advisory speed, correct? Someone said they need chevron signs down the road, add striping, add lane markings, possible friction improvement, yeah. Rumble strips, mowing, oh, that's a low cost one, yeah. I tell you, there's a intersection right down here at the end of one of the roads leading out of the plat I live in. It's kind of strange. There's a plat out in the middle of the country here, um, where there are some houses, and I'm a part of that now. But right down the intersection coming out on the main state 2-lane road, there was a crash about 12 years ago, and the crosses are still there from the two people that lost their lives. And it is very sobering when you go by there, but what it came down to was mowing. The mowing wasn't happening the way it should have, and the people couldn't see the oncoming traffic when they pulled out on their motorcycle, and now there's crosses there with their names on them. So adding lane markings, rumble strips, a curve warning sign with advisory speed plaque, they have that. They also person also went in to talk about a recoverable clear zone with a small clear zone with a recoverable slope. Yep. One person mentioned deer signs. I got to tell you that personally think they aren't as effective as what we anticipate that they will be. Um, just because the deer don't really pay attention to the signs and cross where we've put them up, and that they're everywhere. But I know that there's something that's one of the things that's in the toolbox. So, all right, great job, guys. Thank you. So, crash types that can be addressed by signing. Your curve crashes, definitely. And, in the head on and run off the road categories. And also, your nighttime crashes, primarily your run off the road crashes. So when we first started through LTAP working on road safety audits, we worked with the Warren County engineer, Neil Tunison, and we were able to assist him with getting signage put up on a lot of his roadways that had been identified as high-risk rural roads in Ohio. And he was able to get the majority, if not all of those roadways off that list from just the signage that we were able to assist him with getting put up. But he said one of the things that really surprised him, because, I mean, not only did we help him with getting additional signage put up, like doubling up signs, but we went much larger in the size of the sign, big signs, and they were bright, they were retroreflective. He was really worried. He said and he's told me this story. He said, I was worried those signs that looked like the size of the um, highway um, signs showed up, but we went ahead and put them up anyway. And, he actually had people coming up to him, even, after church, different places, thanking him for the larger signs and doubling them up. He said they felt so much safer driving on those roadways. They could see the signs better. It definitely, you can tell even from the numbers afterwards when we measured it after the installation, helped them out. So, um, again, that low cost safety treatments, that's one of the treatments that's in that manual that you can take a look at. And then on the curve signing, the 2009 MUTCD, which is the basis for Ohio's 2012 version, contains the requirements for horizontal sign curve signing, and this is some of what Ray's going to go over with you here shortly. But it talks about, advanced warning signs, advisory speed plaques, chevrons, um, all of that. And, you know, it's section 2C.06 is the horizontal alignment warning signs. And this is something that Ray's going to discuss with you, but it talks about how horizontal alignment warning signs shall be used in accordance with Table 2C-5 on freeways and expressways and any arterial collector with an average daily traffic of greater than 1,000. So I'm going to turn things over to Ray, and you know what? I showed you that advisory speed video a little early. It was actually supposed to have been here. So pretend like you're watching the video with the lady crashing her eggs in the grocery store right now. And then I'm going to turn things over to Ray. And Ray, you just let me know when you want me to click.
All right. Okay, so the advanced curve warning sign, you've got some options with that. And, it's all about the difference between the speed limit of the road and the advisory speed. And so this table 2C-5 walks you through your decision-making process. So if you could take a look at on the left, you got different types of horizontal alignment signs. Like the turn sign, that is for when you have an advisory speed of 30 miles per hour or less, and it's a 90-degree arrows on that sign. And then your curve sign is when you have 35 miles per hour or higher. It's the arrow is actually curved. It goes over different types of signs, and then um, as you progress to the right on this table, you see the difference between the speed limit and the advisory speed, either 5 miles per hour, 10 or 15, 20, and you can see what type of horizontal alignment sign is recommended or required or optional in these situations. So, and in the picture that showed the advanced curve warning sign with the advisory speed plaque, you see advisory speed plaque there is in the second box down on the left. And then you can go across and see where those are either recommended or required. And as you can see, as soon as you get a difference of 10 miles per hour between the speed limit and the advisory speed, you're required to have that advisory speed plaque attached to that sign. And then as you get past the advisory speed sign and actually get to the curve, you see that's where we talk about chevrons in the one direction large arrow. And you can see as soon as you get to a difference of 15 miles per hour between speed limit and advisory speed, that's where those types of signs are required. And they're recommended at 10 miles per hour and then optional with 5. And then the bottom box has more to do with freeway and divided highway examples with the exit speeds and ramp speeds. But for this class, the top 3 boxes on the left is what we're shooting for in this rural road type of class. So this is an important table to know about. So that's the table 2C-5. We really use that a lot with our township sign grant training process. And then this table here, table 2C-6, we've learned a lot about that in the last 7 or 8 years, as well as as we've been participating in the township sign grant. Um, it's hard to get it across to the township trustees and the roadway superintendents that when they install the chevrons, that you don't just put them out there willy-nilly throughout the curve. They're actually supposed to be evenly spaced to help guide the motorist from the beginning of curvature to the end of curvature. And that really helps them if they're evenly spaced. And this table here walks you through the process of figuring out just how far apart your chevrons should be for that particular curve based upon the advisory speed and the radius of that curve. So you can see for those really sharp curves, you're going to have the chevrons at about 40 feet apart, and then up to 80 and 120 and 160 feet apart as you're able to go faster through other types of curves. So here's a picture of some chevrons in action. As you can see, they have 3 chevrons there evenly spaced throughout this curve. Um, One of the things we learned in our township sign grant program is uh, attaching the yellow reflective post-mounted strips on these chevrons really make them stand out as well. So that's another cheap or low-cost treatment for to help motorists get through the curve safely. But the thing about these chevrons, they do help reduce crashes. They've been proven to lower the crashes, and as you can see here on this table, we do have a crash modification factor associated with chevrons, depending on what crash type you're looking at. And so if we go down through this list, you'll see that nighttime crashes especially have a really big impact. I mean, just putting the chevrons in a curve, uh, you can expect a 25% reduction in your nighttime non-intersection crashes, or 22% reduction in head-on nighttime non-intersection run off the road or side swipe crashes. Um, head-on crashes, I don't think Victoria talked about this, but most head-on crashes happen in curves, and that's because it takes a certain amount of coordination to get through a curve, and not everyone has the same abilities. So you got to lower your speed and stay centered in your lane, and but a lot of times people don't stay in their lane in curves, and they go left of center and cause a head-on crash. And but delineating these curves as best we can, adding chevrons and things like that, pavement markings help people stay in their lane. And but this is an example of how the treatment of chevrons do have a crash modification factor tied to them. And they are definitely one of our uh, most popular, most common low-cost treatments for curves. So here we can walk you through just what is the basic curve signage package. And so as you can take a look at this curve, you can see we've got our advanced warning signs, which shows that this is a sharp curve, a 25-mile-per-hour advisory speed. So the arrow on this advanced warning sign is a 90-degree, arrow, not a curved arrow. And then as you get to the curve itself, you've got the chevrons are shown there evenly spaced and pointed in both directions, and you got your large one direction arrow sign for both directions as well. And then in the notes, it shows where you find the information on each particular sign. So this is the signage package we expect to see on a 2-lane rural road with a sharp curve. And then there's a rather new kind of a optional sign showed up here that you can place at the beginning of curvature. It shows the shape of the curve and the advisory speed. So that's an optional sign. All right, well, let's have an exercise here. And so the question is this, with the details of the curve at the top left of this picture, the speed limit is 55, advisory speed 45, radius of 1,000, and super elevation of 0 degrees, which sadly most rural roads have 0 degrees of super elevation, which doesn't help keep you on the road. But is this um, curve signed properly? So we have the advance warning sign, which shows the shape of the curve. And then in the curve itself, we see some chevrons. So is that all we need for this particular curve? So that's the question for you guys. Or would you recommend more to this curve? So if we go back to our table, we see that this particular curve has an advisory speed of 45, speed limit of 55. So that's a difference of 10. So we have the box highlighted there for 10 miles per hour. So we have certain things that are required. Others are recommended. So we see that they do have chevrons. However, looks like maybe there's some things missing. So what's missing? Type it in the question box.
Okay, Ray. We have folks putting in their advisory speed plaque and then sign spacing. Advisory speed plaque's gotten 3 votes so far here. 3 people put it in and 1 person put in sign spacing.
Right, they need the advisory speed plaque, it turns out. There's certain other things recommended that's not required, but if you see something that says recommended, and it's low cost as a sign, the question is, why wouldn't you install it? And that's what we preach to our townships. We're actually buying all the signs they want, or, why not put it on their list? So one of those is the One Direction large arrow sign. So they could have added that as well. The other thing I like to throw in again is the retro reflective post mounted strips that we found out cost about $4 each. So why not load up your curve signage with those reflective strips on the posts as well? They really make a difference, making them stand out. So, but that's a good exercise in in how we come to the decisions of what signage is included in a curve.
Yep. And here's your information on the chevron spacing. But somebody did add in there too that they thought a little more snow and ice removal action would help too.
Probably,
So
especially with the 0 degrees of super elevation. So there's nothing there to help you stay on the road
yep.
as far as the force of gravity helping to pull you to the center of the curve instead of sling shooting you off the right side of the curve there. Okay, so there's how we came up with the spacing of the chevrons.
So I would guess, I mean, I don't know. Would you guess, Ray, that they probably did need to space those out, or actually using a tighter spacing is what it would have been.
Yeah, the FHWA recommends using, when you see you have 2 choices to make, they recommend tighter spacing, just to give better, like I said, better guidance from beginning of curvature all the way through the end of curvature.
Those next topics, your favorite, Ray. Aren't you like the star of a video on ball banking?
Yes, oh my gosh, I've become a millionaire, but don't tell anybody that, of all the hits on my YouTube video on how to conduct an advisory speed study. I kid, I get nothing. But we do have a video on our LTAP website on how to properly conduct an advisory speed study. But there's different methods to determine the advisory speed. One, it says use an accelerometer, which we call the digital ball bank indicator that you can borrow from us. We have several. Um, in our possession that we loan out to people as far as as part of our equipment loan program, and that's what we show in the video, how to use that properly. There's also a design speed equation or a traditional ball bank indicator. The old had tubes of some sort of liquid in there, and it would help. It would measure the centrifugal force of how the I don't know how the water tilts as you drive through the curve. I saw that Dick McGinnis is in class today. I'm sure he's a real whiz at that traditional ball bank indicator, right, Dick? And there's had some different numbers in there from the OMUTCD of how those was determined.
Sorry, I clicked too quickly. There you go. There's your
You did. You
numbers.
left me hanging there.
I
So it
didn't
said
mean to,
16
Ray.
degrees for speeds of 20 mile per hour or less, whatever. So we think the digital ball bank indicator is a lot more accurate. So that's why we have several for people to borrow. So if you have some curves that need an advisory speed, just give us a call. We'll ship one of those out to you to borrow for 2 or 3 weeks, whatever you need.
Yeah, and I'm going to chime in here because having lived in the rural part of our state for going on 30 years now, I got to tell you that in the 30 years I've been out here, cars have improved. The car from 30 years ago is not the car we have today. And if you haven't looked at your advisory speeds in a while, you probably need to go update them. And you don't have to do it all at once. I mean, you could do it in a stepped approach. Maybe pick a section of your, jurisdiction and decide you're going to do that this year and put another section of it on your work plan for next year. But, you know, check the advisory speeds that you have up because you know newer cars can take the roadway differently than the cars from even 20 years ago, let alone 30 years ago can. And if you get an advisory speed out there that people don't you know believe in any longer because they know they've been driving that curve a lot faster than what you had it signed from all those years ago, it's going to cause an issue when they go to a jurisdiction that has recently updated their advisory speeds. And they think that, okay, well, if I typically drive the advisory speeds and where I live that are marked as 35 at, 45 or 50, and they go to a jurisdiction that has recently updated their advisory speeds, then they try to take those curves at those speeds, they're more than likely going to end up off the edge of the road if they're not careful and slow back down. So, just do your due diligence and be updating your advisory speeds on a pretty set pattern. You know, just work it into your work plan. Borrow one of our 8 ball bank indicators that we've got. We're happy to loan it out to you, and then you get to watch Ray's world famous video that takes about 15 minutes on how to use the ball bank indicator, and he takes you through the whole process. From setting up the device in the vehicle all the way through filling out the forms for each curve that we have templates of on our website, so then you can build your sign order off of it. Thanks for letting me interrupt, Ray.
No problem. Am I talking about this one too?
Yeah, you were going to talk about this is our case study, how they went through and determined the advisory speeds of their curves.
Yeah. So down in Baldwin County, Alabama, uh, they use the Riker Curve Advisory Reporting Service. Now, Riker manufactures our digital ball bank indicators that we have, but they also have a different thing called the service, the CARS service, Curve Advisory Reporting Service. So it collects data on a single ride through these curves, and it produces automated reports that comply with MUTCD requirements. And so this Baldwin County decided to use this service for crash investigation, citizen complaints, and they use it in updating their paving program. And they wanted to make sure that they were complying with the MUTCD for their horizontal alignment mandate. And so this is the largest county in the state. And let's see, The Riker's car system makes use of a cloud data storage, allowing access to the data upon logging onto the car's portal. And let's see what we got here. So in this case study, they found that they actually had more signs than were required, and some were removed. So there's the before picture, and then here was the after.
So it actually went in the opposite direction than what most of us would have expected.
Right, and so
So I would think if they have the money to be able to afford the service, that this is another way to get it done. But, we know that jurisdictions' budgets are very, very tight. So, I wouldn't necessarily, um, you know, feel that you have to do the service, but just be aware that it's out there. And that, if you do have the funding to pay for it, they can definitely, you can use that system and get through quicker than the method of borrowing our ball bank indicator and putting two people in the car to drive through every curve number of times at different speeds. So, which this brings us to our last slide for the day. And Ray, you've done a great job. We're ending right on time. We'll be respectful of everybody's time, but you know, we want to just make sure that you realize with these curve sign enhancements that there are additional treatments that can be used that exceed the MUTCD requirements. And that's where we talked about the bigger signs. You can double up signs, the yellow, fluorescent yellow prismatic sheeting. You can use some overhead placement. On our next webinar, which will be next week, we're going to talk about, flashers. Ray has mentioned a number of times those reflectorized posts, which you see here in these images on your screen, and they really are really, really low cost. But there's others in the MUTCD in section 2A.15. So that top photo, I was going to reference this image earlier, but I'm glad I didn't. That's one of those visual traps. You see that the road actually curves off to the right, but the telephone poles keep going beyond the road. So I can't begin to guess how many times somebody's probably ended up in that farmer's field before they put up those turn to the right signs to let people know the road was turning. So, Ray, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
well, I was going to say back where we were talking about that case study in Alabama, I think what happened was people weren't paying attention to those um, advanced warning signs or the advisory speed plaques, and because there were so many of them, and then when they uh, reduced the number of them, it actually became more effective.
Yeah, there's a balance. You don't want to have sign clutter. You want to have
Right.
things appropriately signed, but we know that, where we're at right now, that there are areas that definitely need more signage, especially if they're areas that have been determined that could have the potential to have a crash occur because it's same or similar to another area with maybe a higher ADT that has crashes that happen all the time. So with that, we're going to wrap up for today. This has been the Ray and Victoria Show, and we hope to see you back next week. Would say same bat time, same bat channel, but that's not the case. I believe our session next week will be on Wednesday.
Is it
So
Wednesday?
it's when, well, no, you're right, Tuesday. I'm sorry, Ray.
Yeah, see?
But we have part two on Tuesday and then part three on Wednesday. So we hope to see you back. And
Back to
everyone,
back days.
please be safe, take care, and go out and make your roads safer. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.